One of the most overused phrases I've found is Renaissance man, but it's not overused or inappropriate for one person I met with recently, Walter Masi. Walter Masi has been the leader of Morehouse College, the University of California, University of Chicago, the Art Institute, the National Science Foundation, Argonne Labs, and now he's leading the effort to get the giant Magellan telescope funded by the U.S. government and by private institutions. I sat down with him recently at the University of Chicago to talk about what he's most proud of having achieved in this incredible life he's had. Dr. Masi, you have been, I would say, a Renaissance man. You've been involved in education, the arts, business, science. Of all the things you've done in your incredible career, what is it that you're most proud of?
Well, actually, I'm proud of all of those things. I think the position that has given me more satisfaction is going back to Morehouse College, which was my alma mater, as president. I went back in 1995. And my wife Shirley and I, when we talk about the various things we have done, we agree that that was a lot of fun, but as I said, satisfying in a number of ways. To go back to your alma mater and to preside over the graduation of about 5,000 African-American men.
Well, let's talk about your background for a moment. You grew up in Mississippi when it was very segregated. What was it like growing up in Mississippi in the 1940s and 50s?
My mother was a school teacher. I'm an elementary school principal. I had an aunt who was a school teacher. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I didn't want to be a school teacher. I thought I might want to be an engineer. I have no idea. I think I just heard the word engineer. I knew I would probably go to college because even in Mississippi in those days, my family went off to college, mostly in Mississippi, at Mississippi institutions. I didn't know I would wind up at Morehouse, and that was serendipity, as a lot of my life has been. It's won this scholarship that allowed me to go from the 10th grade to Morehouse, and that really changed my life. But
you grew up in an all-segregated area. I assume that you were not going to lunches and dinners with whites at that time.
No, the only lunches and dinners we came close to was working in the kitchen. My grandmother worked as a domestic, and even my mother, who worked as an elementary school teacher and principal in the summers, sometimes worked as a domestic. We were in a totally segregated sounds too mild. It was apartheid.
Did you worry for your safety and life at times?
Not constantly. One had to be careful, and there were things you knew you were not to do from a very young age. White women were very dangerous. White men also, but in particular things, white girls and white women. There were places you didn't go. So there were modes of behavior which you expected or you learned to adapt to. But I didn't wake up every morning thinking I would be lynched. We lived in a community that was a fairly warm community. I had a big family, cousins lived all around me, and I would say in spite of the harsh segregation around us, within our little bubble, you might say, as much as you could keep it, I had a good childhood.
You got a scholarship to go to Morehouse when it was, you had only completed the 10th grade.
Yes.
So what happened to the 11th and 12th grade? Didn't need that? And you went to Morehouse, weren't you kind of young to get to college?
I was 16, and I was part of a program, so I wasn't the only one. It had been going on for 3 years, and I was in the third year of this experiment. And there were about 15 of us in my group, and there had been some before. So the college had sort of adjusted to these young kids coming in who didn't have courses. So we had good counselors, we had very good teachers, and evidently we were smart. I didn't know it because we were able to not just survive, but I would say we were some of the most accomplished students in the college.
Okay, so you go to Morehouse and you decide you want to major in physics. So was that a very popular major at Morehouse at the time?
I was the only physics major for my entire 4 years in my class. There was one before me and one before him.
And what did you tell your parents you were going to be a physics major? What did they say?
My parents were very good. My mother, I think, would have wanted me to be the typical mother, to be a doctor, and I got a PhD. That was something. But they were comfortable with whatever I chose. I came to physics through mathematics. I was not a tinkerer. I was not a person who did experiments. And in fact, I was not that attracted to laboratory science, but I liked mathematics, and I was pretty good at it. And when I took my first physics course, I saw that here was a way mathematics could be used to try to understand the world around us.
So you majored in physics, you graduated from Mórehus, and then you decided to get a PhD in physics at Washington University in St. Louis. Why did you pick Washington University? A very good school, but how did you pick that school? My
physics teacher at Mórehus, his name was Hans Sabinus Hobart Christensen. He was a Danish white gentleman with a PhD from Harvard. And he became my mentor and grew into a friend. But as I said, I was the only, in my advanced physics classes at Mórehus, I was the only one in the class. So it was like the Oxford tutorial system, just Chris and myself. And Chris recommended that I go to WashU. This is 1960 now, and because I worked at Mórehus 1 year. And it wasn't clear that every place was going to be welcoming or nurturing and supportive of a young black person who wanted to be a physicist. And Chris thought WashU had that environment, and it turned out that it did.
All of a sudden, you're handing out money on behalf of the federal government, the National Science Foundation.
Sure.
Did you find you were more popular than you had been before?
Oh, you won't believe it. Yeah. It's always best to be on the side of being asked for money than to ask for it.
Got your PhD, what did you decide to do?
I came to Argonne here in Chicago as a postdoc, and Argonne was run by the University of Chicago, so I was also associated with the University of Chicago then. And my first job was working with a group at Argonne National Laboratory.
Okay, so you worked at Argonne. Eventually you got a teaching position at the University of Illinois in Urbana.
I did.
And then you did that for a while. You were teaching physics?
I went to Urbana for two reasons. I loved Argonne, and I loved my research, but that's what I was doing. I lived right here in Hyde Park, about 4 blocks from here, Drexel Avenue. We could see it from where we were seated. 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and from where we are now, you could see the city burning, and I could see it from my apartment. And it really became clear to me that I had this feeling that I was just not contributing to the civil rights movement to the degree that I felt that I ought to. I was going to Argonne, doing my research, coming home. I tutored kids around the community. But I wanted to be more engaged, and I thought if I went to a college campus where there were students, I would be more engaged in activities. So I went to Urbana for that reason, and Urbana turned out to be the very best place in the world for the kind of physics I did.
You did that for a while, and then you got recruited to go to Brown University?
I did.
And you became the dean of students at Brown?
The dean of the college.
Dean of the college. And were there a lot of African-American professors then at Brown?
Actually, at that point, there were quite a few. And interestingly, you asked that because I was just reminiscing with some of my old friends about what we call a golden age at Brown. Brown, and then when I went there in 1969 and 70, we had me in physics, engineering, chemistry, political science, history, 3 in English. The general counsel was black. The associate head of human resource. We had a wonderful black community. It didn't grow linearly. It didn't even last for a while. But yes, the period I was there in the early 70s was a
so
very vibrant period.
You were at Brown for a number of years, and then you got recruited to be the head of Argonne?
I did.
And so what does Argonne actually do?
Argonne is what's called a general science national laboratory. It's one of the laboratories that the Department of Energy owns, but they're operated by contractors. The university operates Argonne. So for much of its history, it was involved in nuclear reactors. Now it does basic science, a lot of materials science, and low temperature science. That's why I was there in the 60s. It also has a very large facility called the Advanced Photon Source, which is like a giant high-energy X-ray machine that can, penetrate through materials and examine them. It also has some of the world's fastest computers. It has a big program in energy storage, advanced research on batteries. So it's a broad-based energy research laboratory now.
Okay, so you're running Argonne. Is that a place that was filled with a lot of black physicists and mathematicians, or it was fairly white?
I think it was fairly is an understatement.
Mostly white.
Overwhelmingly white.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly white.
All right, so you're doing that for a number of years, and then you get a chance to be the head of the National Science Foundation.
I did.
All of a sudden, you're handing out money on behalf of the federal government, the National Science Foundation.
Sure.
Did you find you were more popular than you had been before?
Oh, you won't believe it. Yeah. It's always best to be on the side of being asked for money than to ask for it.
So you're doing that for a few years,
Yeah.
and then you get a chance to be the provost of the University of California system. Is that right?
That's correct.
So why did you take that position? It's a great job, but you'd want to be a head of a major university?
I did by that time. Through my transition from doing physics to administering science at Argonne and then NSF, I began to see that I really had a knack for, running organizations. And that people liked working for me. And I liked working with people. And I saw that I could get things done over areas that I cared about. Science education, science for underrepresented groups, these kinds of things that I couldn't do as an individual scientist.
All right, so you took the position, you're the provost, the number 2 position in all of the University of California system, maybe the leading public education system in the United States, higher education.
Yeah.
And so you have a chance to be the chancellor or the overall head of the University of California system if you'd stayed there for another year or two. And then all of a sudden, your alma mater comes calling, Morehouse, and they say, come back and be the president of this small college in Atlanta, not the head of the University of California system. Why didn't you say, look, I'm going to be the head of the University of California system. It's a better job than being the head of Morehouse. Why did you not do that?
I did say that. I said that for several months.
Okay.
When my alumni and friends and trustees, I said, no, you're crazy. I've only been here a little while. My whole career has been in big science, big institutions. I mean, that's what I know. But I thought about it. It really was a family decision. One day Shirley surprised me by flying in my 2 sons for dinner, and I came home from work, and there they were. And we talked a lot about it and reached the decision that I could probably do more in areas that I cared about, some of which I just mentioned, at Morehouse, one. Secondly, that I really owed practically everything that I had achieved to my beginnings at Morehouse, and that I ought to do this. Our youngest son, the one who lives in Amsterdam now, Eric, said, being head of the University of California would be great, Dad, but you could get a lot more accomplished being at Morehouse.
How many years were you the president of Morehouse?
I was there 12 years.
12 years, okay. So while you're at Morehouse, you get an opportunity to go on the board of the Bank of America.
No, I did that in California.
Okay.
Because then I went on the board of the old bank.
The old
before
bank
we
of-
merged,
all right.
and we were located in San Francisco.
And then at one point they said you should be the chairman of the board of Bank of America. Is that right?
That's right. Wasn't that simple, but that's right.
And did you want to be chairman of the board of Bank of America?
I had no time to think about it. It came about so quickly. It came as a result of a shareholders meeting in April of 2009, after the shareholders had put on the proxy, the agenda, a proposition to separate the chair from the CEO. As you know, in most corporations, that's a combined position. And the shareholder vote got a majority of the votes. Now, the board didn't have to accept that shareholder vote's recommendations in that regard, but the board did. And just after the board meeting, the then chairman, Ken Lewis, said the board executive committee was going to recommend it to the board that I be the chairman. This is on the way into the meeting. And I said, how long do I have to think about this? He said, about a minute.
All right. So then after you get that position, a couple days later, the federal government calls you up and says, guess what? We got to talk to you. You got some problems. They told you that you had to do some serious things to fix the Bank of America. Is that right?
That's correct. I thought when I accepted the position, I thought, wow, it's prestigious, it's an honor. And I thought, well, I can do it. I've been on the board 15 years, so I wasn't a novice in the board room or with, by then, a financial institution. I'd been on the board of McDonald's, where we had a non-executive chair. At one point, Motorola had a non-executive chair, so did BP. So I had seen what they did. It's about a 2-day-a-week job, and preside over meetings, you help with the agenda, you keep in touch with the CEO. I said, well, I can do that. Until the Fed called and summoned me to Richmond, which is the office of the Federal Reserve branch that oversees Bank of America, which is located in Charlotte, and asked me to bring some other directors with me because I didn't want to take this message back to my colleagues by myself. And the message they gave me turned this into a full-time job.
So they said that you had some financial problems at Bank of America and you need to make some changes.
Yes.
And ultimately, you had to spend a lot of time fixing the Bank of America. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so then you led an effort to pick Brian Moynihan, who's still the CEO of Bank of America. Is that right?
That's correct.
So that worked out okay.
That's worked out fantastic. Brian, I think, has just done a wonderful, it's not just my opinion, he's been chosen CEO of the Year, I think, a couple of times, not just in the financial industry, but throughout corporate America, and the bank has done very well.
Let me ask you right now about something you're involved in right now, which is the Giant Magellan Telescope. You're leading the effort to get people to fund the Giant Magellan Telescope. Why do we need the Giant Magellan Telescope since we have the Webb telescope? It seems to be sending back pretty nice pictures. How much better is the Giant Magellan going to be?
4 times better.
4 times better.
4 times better resolution, which means the pictures will be sharper. But the science, the way it will work, the Webb, as you've seen those pictures, very sharp. But they are identifying parts of galaxies and space almost back to the beginning of the universe that people haven't seen. It cannot focus, however, more sharply as we would like to be able to identify objects. So the Webb will identify a portion of space. The GMT, Giant Magellan Telescope, can, in effect, zoom in on that space, have finer resolution, look at it more clearly. And in addition to that, we'll have a set of instruments which can collect that light, analyze it, and see, for example, does it contain signs of oxygen or water? So they'll be complementary.
All right, but how much does it cost before we get the Giant Magellan Telescope?
We're estimating now about a little over $2 billion.
$2 billion, and where is that money coming from?
About half is coming from private sources. The University of Chicago, being one of the 11 partners, will put up about half, and the federal government is now we're negotiating with the National Science Foundation to come up with the other half.
You know, I've often thought the way you could raise money for the Giant Magellan Telescope is to take away the name Magellan, because he didn't put up any money for it, and let somebody very wealthy, Elon Musk or Bill Gates or somebody, say, we'll name it after them and put up $1 billion. You ever thought of that?
We think of that every day. I do. Yes. You have a millionaire that you like?
Well, I think you need a multi-billionaire, but there might be some out there. If you name it after him, it's a big naming opportunity. But
Actually, I'm laughing, but we do. We have naming opportunities all the way from a mirror, an instrument that will look for exoplanets for $10 million. The mirrors can be named. We actually have one mirror named Mitchell, a generous donor through the University of Arizona, $20 million. The telescope dome itself is $100 million. And you can name we can negotiate the price for the whole telescope.
What are they going to name me after? Anything, the Walter Massey, anything? Or anything named after you?
I think they have some porta potties down there.
The life of people on Earth is going to be better if that is funded because of what? We're going to discover that there's life somewhere else in the universe, and how is that going to make our life better?
I don't think it's going to make your life better in the sense of delivering material comfort, material advantages. I think it's going to make human life more interesting and probably inspire people to think about their life differently. The artist Jeff Koons, who's a friend of mine, says that when he looks at those images from the James Webb telescope or the others that show you almost the beginning of the universe, you see these galaxies, it just makes you realize how special it is to be living in these times when you can discover these things, and how special it is to be a human being. I mean, how improbable it is that there's something like us that has been generated over all of these years, and now we still exist.
Do you believe there is life in the universe somewhere else other than the Earth?
I do. Now, why do I say that? It's just probability. There was Enrico Fermi, who used to be here, actually, is purported to have said, "Where is everybody? Why haven't we heard from them?" Because just given the number of stars with what now they're calling exoplanets, planets that look like they would be situated close enough in a position with a star to have life. They've already discovered 5,000 in our galaxy. And given the number of galaxies, billions in the universe, it just seems to be probably wholly unlikely, from a mathematical, statistical point of view, that you wouldn't have conditions like we have on there. But I don't have any other reason.
So as you look back on your life, incredible career, what would you say is the legacy that you would like to have people think about you? What would you most proud of having done? Is it the position at Morehouse or your scientific leadership? What would you say is your legacy to your children, grandchildren, and your fellow Americans?
Well, it wouldn't be any particular accomplishment. I would hope it would be that people would realize that you can accomplish a great deal in life no matter where you start. If you, first, I do think luck is involved, a lot in luck, but if you have the right mentors, the right support, and if you yourself are willing to work hard at it and be curious enough and bold enough to take advantage of opportunities when they arise.